What's up, man?
What's up? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Let me adjust some volumes here.
Is it not loud?
Yeah, if there's a way to... Let me just check if to make sure it's not my headphone. I should be able to just add some compression a little bit. So what sources is it showing you?
Like it's showing the options, but they're all grayed out.
They're all grayed out? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we can fly with this. I mean, there's always a way for me to boost the signal. Sorry, I know it always, like, it's always weird. We just, like, met each other, and then we're, like, having to figure out, like, the technical stuff.
I tend to have problems with the volume on my mic. On all
really?
of them, for some reason. I joined a D&D group with some friends.
Oh, nice.
And we play online, and we played last Thursday, and for the first, like, 45 minutes, I was talking. And I was making jokes along with everybody, and I was wondering why nobody was laughing at my jokes. And then it came up being my turn, and they're like, "Joe, we can't hear you." And I was
Are
like,
you
"Oh,
there?"
damn.
Do they?
I was like, no wonder nobody was laughing.
Right. Yeah. I've never played D&D. I have a good friend who's like super into it, and I always ask him about it because I'm the type to ask like a billion questions about stuff.
Yeah.
Watching people online play it or people explain it, to me it's like really interesting because it's just all creative kind of play in your mind.
Yeah, I'm brand new to it. I mean, I've been into like various shows and stuff throughout like probably this last year. Mm-hmm. But we just started this campaign like a month ago, and it's my first time playing. So like, from watching stuff, I have an idea of the mechanics, but when you're actually like playing through and applying the things that you know, it's much more difficult than it seems. But it's a very interesting like narrative storytelling device.
Yeah.
You have the DM who's like basically come up with the world and everything. You're watching this narrative play out, and all their decisions are left up to chance, so it's not scripted.
Right.
So you're like following along, and the stakes feel higher because, man, I really want this to come through for them, and then they fail a dice roll, and then they have to adjust to actually failing and trying to pick up the pieces of their failure and whatever. So
right.
It's a really interesting storytelling device.
Yeah, that's one of the most interesting parts to me is like it feels like it hinges on DM is the dungeon master, right? That's what it stands for. Okay. That requires so much like storytelling skills, would you say, from your experience?
Oh yeah. When I watch, I tend to like dissect, because I've watched different shows with different casts and DMs and stuff, like listening to podcasts at work, and you can tell kind of who's more of a storyteller by how they adapt to characters' decisions. Because you can like watch one show and a character comes up with something, and the DM's kind of fumbling a bit and trying to like, all right, well, how does my world work in the application of this decision they made? And then you watch another one, and character makes a decision, and the DM adapts immediately to it. Like
wow.
They've got the whole world like built in their head, like they're actually like living in it almost. It's
in real time.
Yeah,
that's like a different skill. Do you think you'd be? I mean, we'll get into, because I mean, I'm interviewing you as illustrator, cartoonist, and this is interesting that we're starting off with this kind of storytelling world. How do you think you'd fare in that role? I would consider you someone who digests like a story idea, and you have to communicate it in like a few images or even just one image. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think I'd be capable. Like I think I'm good in as far as like concepts and the abstract of ideas, but in terms of like actual full lived in world building, I don't think I have the brain for that. And worlds like that, there's a lot of like background and lore and whatever that you need to apply. That way you have things to pull from when a character makes a decision. My stuff tends to be more self-centered. Like it's much more focused on myself and my experiences. It's not as expansive as like full world building, where my stuff is typically just me.
Your work derives from your experience personally. And in this world, it's kind of like you're creating new worlds, new universes.
Yeah, a world for everyone to experience.
Right.
Yeah.
That's cool. I like where this is going. I mean, let's do a quick intro real quick. I love when conversations just kind of jump in, and then you forget to even go, your name is Joe Rivera. So Joe, thank you for jumping on Craft Talk.
Yeah, of course.
We've been meaning to do this for a while, so like I'm really happy that we get to look at us, we're doing it.
Yeah, finally.
Yeah. This is the first time we've really met. You've always been really supportive of me and Craft Talk. You tell me, I could be completely wrong, but I get the sense that I resonate with a lot of the ways that you feel when it comes to creativity, just because of the messages that we've gone back and forth with. I feel like you and I have the same thoughts with like creative doubts or kind of the imposter syndrome feeling. I get that sense from your work. So I think it's really fun to converse with you on like a lot of these topics because you have a thing called lunch break.
Lunch break, yeah.
Craft Talk also works off of kind of like in between life. Lunch break really resonates with me in that you do illustrations during your lunch break and all that stuff. And sometimes I'll do interviews during my lunch break, during my day job and all that stuff. So this is a long way to go about saying that I feel like I can really resonate with you in your work. So I just really appreciate you taking the time and really like your work.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I love the podcast. What you and I tend to relate on is how personal we take the work that we do is. And like there's, I don't know if it's ego, but there's a lot of like value that we place in what we consider ourselves to be as artists and our work output. And does our level of productivity play a factor in our right to call ourselves an artist in any sense? If I could like boil down, most of our conversations have been, it's mostly, I'd say probably that point.
Yeah, it's like this constant struggle with our identities or our worth being tied to just the current thing that we're doing, not necessarily the overall big picture of all of the volume of work that we've done. It's like the work that you've done previously, you've pretty much thrown away and you're just like, well, that's already been done. It only matters what I do now or next or whatever. And if I'm not doing anything, then it means that I'm not really an artist.
Yeah. It's like if you're currently not working on something, it's like, well, does it still count anymore? Am I still an artist if I'm not currently arting right now? Like, just because I did in the past, that's my past life. It's like, no, it's always a part of you. And whether you go in and out of phases of working on stuff or not, it's a way for you to, I mean, the cliche of expressing yourself.
How far back does your illustration work and artistry go?
Drawing pretty much as long as I can remember. I think I could probably pinpoint like 2 people in my life when I was like very young that like sort of really fostered it. And one was my cousin Michelle. Like I remember she taught me how to draw dogs.
Okay.
Once. And I just loved the process, like the repetition of the way that she taught me how to draw them. And like when I was a kid in class, I think like kindergarten, first grade, we used to have to keep a journal. And like, I think every Monday we would come in and we would write a little journal entry about what we did over the weekend.
Whoa. And
I would always do drawings with my writings and to like illustrate what I did that weekend. And it'd be like the biggest lie ever of like, we could have just gone to church that weekend or something, me and my family. And I'm like, well, me and my friends at church, we did this whole thing. And it'd be like some spy mission that we went on at church or something. Like, no, you did not do that. But
so you're saying you were a dungeon master all the way back in the day?
Probably. Yeah, I guess so.
Nice. Yeah. Did you ever feel like drawing, because it sounds like it's coming from this pure, passionate place where you just kind of enjoy it. Was there a certain point where you felt like it became like a competition with yourself or even others?
Probably in college, I think.
Okay.
Going to art school, everybody's kind of vying for the attention of professors and networking and trying to make sure you got references so when you leave and you put your portfolio together and your resume and everything you can submit and you've got the stamp of approval from whatever professor and stuff. And I'm not good at like social hierarchies and trying to network and BS, and a lot of it came from that of like not wanting to play the game, even though I probably should as far as like making connections goes.
Sure.
But you just like, you see the work of your peers and stuff, and there's a healthy level of competition for sure when you see other people's work and you're like, all right, man, I gotta step
Why
it
does
up.
everybody seem better than me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the pressures probably came from that, where it's like, man, this is less of a thing that I do to enjoy the space in my mind instead of overthinking things, I can escape into drawing and overthink like the shapes that I'm drawing and stuff. And it became less of that enjoyment and more of the overall pressure of, man, I've committed to a career of this thing.
That is so tricky when you find a passion at such a young age. And this is very similar with me. You find a passion at a young age, and like the natural trajectory would be like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm going to go to college for the thing that I'm passionate about, because everybody is like, follow your passions, right?
Yeah.
It's really tricky once you start aligning it with a possible career. And have huge respect for people who do art as a career and find a way to make that balance. But yeah, it does. I can see where that could be a little bit of the origin story of where this flip starts to happen of this is an escape versus my means of like survival.
Yeah. It's weird to put like the pressures of success and whatever that means and finances and everything on something that was initially something that you did and just felt good about doing it for the sake of doing it.
Yeah.
Especially like if as artists, our work in whatever form is a form of personal expression. And so when you wrap your value of success and finances and survivability and whatever hellscape we're living in is all like when all of that is dependent on something you were supposed to enjoy, it's like you're not enjoying the thing that you enjoy. You're taking the thing that was enjoyment from as an escape from survival is now another pressure of survival.
Yeah. I wonder, do you think it's like self-inflicted? Because I think that's something that you and I are always like, am I doing this to myself? Am I putting all this pressure on myself?
100% self-inflicted, yeah. I look at you doing your work and I'm like, man, he's just doing the thing. He's enjoying it. And I imagine you probably look at me the same when I post whatever thing I've drawn. Like, oh, he's just doing the thing. It's like, no, on the other side of that is, oh, man, all right, I got to set time aside to do this thing and this thing and this thing and squeeze in the art in the middle of all of it.
Right. I always try to preach balance when it comes to creative work. But actually living that is like so much harder than like it seems, because even I was talking to a friend of mine where she was like, why can't I just do the passionate things like the art that I do? Do I have to post it? How do I feel if I like just did the thing and never posted it? If you were to honestly look at that question, it's really tough, because it's like, could I? Because a part of being an artist is also sharing your work, right? Like that's part of the creative process.
If you're to like strip everything away, the base level of being an artist is just making art. I think maybe we tend to tack on the additional pressure of it needs to be shared. I think art most often like it's about a conversation between the artist and the viewer or whatever. The art representing something in the world, whether it's something deep and emotional, some truth about the human condition, or it's just for the sake of like a meme. Yeah. Like it's something to be shared, and when it's perceived, then that sort of gives it value and how people take in that thing. Most of my stuff, it's just like really bad drawings in my sketchbook. Just really bad versions of a thing before I eventually take that to the thing. And like if I just left it as the thing in my sketchbook, it'd probably be fine.
What's the percentage, would you say, gets left in the sketchbook versus the thing that you feel comfortable putting out there to be perceived and be probably misinterpreted, like, or whatever?
Probably like 90% of it, or more than that. I mean, because a lot of my sketchbook is also kind of like my mental health journal. Yeah. And so I carry it around everywhere. If I I'm having a bout of like anxiety, I'll write in it and sometimes do a little doodle, and then the next page is like some really bad drawing of Spider-Man's head, and then the next page is a bunch of little thumbnails of an exploration of whatever next thing I'm gonna draw is.
That's cool. So your sketchbook and your mental health journal is the same book?
Yeah, it should probably be separated to like compartmentalize things. Oh, okay. But it makes it easier to have like sort of this extension of my brain that I keep on me at all times, almost like a backup hard drive that I keep on me.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. You've been kind of carrying that practice since all the way back when you first started drawing. Was you said kindergarten or something? You kind of had a journal.
Yeah, some form of a journal, and I actually didn't realize that. I never made the connection until this conversation, actually.
Oh, really? Nice.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
have you been doing the journal sketchbook thing since then, or like was there like a little gap?
I think most of my childhood was drawing on random scraps of copy paper, and then I had like a folder that I would keep them in.
Okay.
Just a chunky, disorganized folder. And then I think late in high school, my art classes, we had to keep a sketch journal, and that was filled with research and studies of other artists or whatever piece we were going to work on. And then from there it kind of started, and then I'd say probably college is when I was like, I need to keep this thing on me at all times, because
yeah,
whatever idea I have, I want to be able to draw it and not be on some scrap sheet of paper and
right.
lose the paper or the idea or whatever.
Where's your balance when it comes to physical notebooks to like your digitizing stuff? Like, do you do any brainstorming or ideas digitally?
Yeah, I use the Notes app in my phone a lot. If I don't feel like hunting down my sketchbook, so I'll just like whip out my phone and throw little ideas in it. So I have a bunch of notes in my phone that don't make any amount of sense.
I love that.
Yeah.
Me too. It's just like when you go back to it, and like sometimes you never go back to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, what was I trying to like? It made so much sense in my head at the time.
Yeah. If anything, it's good for a laugh in like a year when you're like organizing your notes. You're like, just look at all the stuff that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
What is this idea? And you get a little laugh for yourself.
Right. By the way, probably one of the biggest compliments you can ever give me was what you just said of like, I never made the connection until now. Like that's, to me, I'm like, my job is done. I can go home. We can log off now.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because on occasion I'll look at those journals just to like kind of get in touch with like little Joe's mind.
Yeah. The whole journals. You have those.
Yeah. Like my kindergarten journals. Yeah.
Do you find young Joe, what similarities are still there? That's like still kind of at the core.
Very self-involved, very, very much about my personal experiences, because I think that's the only thing I know how to talk about.
So you were like really in tune all the way back then. You were in tune with yourself and how you were feeling.
Yeah, sadly, like very self-aware from a very young age. Yeah, I'm in my 30s now, like very early 30s, but in my brain I've been like 45 since I was like 5 or 6. Like I always tell people, like I think I'm gonna peak when I hit my midlife crisis. Like that's when I'm gonna feel like the person I was always supposed to be.
Yeah, you were like contemplating the meaning of life all the way back, meaning of existence all the way back then.
Far too young. Yeah.
I feel that. Yeah, so let's jump in a little bit about your process. Now that we've kind of gotten into like your notebook, in some sense, as the dungeon master, you're trying to encapsulate the entire story, right? Or you have this idea of the story, or for you, your experience. You want to translate that into something that is relatable, can resonate. Like, what is your process there? I would love to hear how, like, from brainstorming into like the production.
Like Lunch Break, for example, that started just as an exercise in getting myself to work on art again. Because once I graduated from art school, there's probably like a year or two where just complete burnout. I just like hated everything I drew. Anytime I sat down to draw, I was like, this sucks. I don't want to do it. So nothing got finished. And I hit like a pretty bad mental health point, and I had like sort of come to the realization that like part of my value and like thing that I pride myself on is like my art and drawing. I was like, well, maybe I can get some self-worth out of the thing that I've always loved to do. Maybe I like make an actual practice out of doing that. And so that became Lunch Break. Was all right, no matter what, 10-15 minutes on lunch break, you're going to draw something. It doesn't matter what, but you have to draw something. So that process eventually evolved into go on my lunch break, sit for like 10 minutes, just let my brain wander wherever, and whatever recurring thought I have, just write that down. So I write that down, and then I just free write for another like 5-10 minutes. Basically, all right, what have I written? What are like, if we're thinking in like your classic webcomic, like 4-panel page, what are the 4 bullet points of the thought that I had? How do I break this down? Okay, well, these are the main points that I have. Taking that sequential order kind of, and just being like, all right, well, what's some version of a story out of this, out of whatever experience? And then break that down. All right, now we got 4 squares that we're going to draw in. Do really bad drawings, really bad scribble sketch figures. Then I would take that, and then I would just think about it all day at work. In this panel that I drew, I didn't like how this was placed here, this was placed there. It would just give me something to like ruminate on instead of whatever bad thoughts I was having.
Yeah.
It's like I can just obsess over this thing, and then I get home from work and just hunker down in Photoshop and draw and clean it up, and then next day post it, and then start the process over again.
Wow.
And so it was a daily practice for a few months, and then I burnt myself out because I was like, this is all I'm doing is drawing and working, drawing and working, drawing and working.
Yeah.
I still use that process now in my daily life. For if there's a project, I'm like, I use my lunchtime to sketch it out, get the idea out, and then after work I'll start up on actually developing the idea.
I feel like that skill set actually translates to a lot of things, because like even though I'm not a cartoonist or anything, but trying to break down ideas into a story that makes sense and is digestible. A lot of times when people have ideas and it's ruminating in their head, it's like a big thing, and there's so many details that you want people to understand. There's always like asterisks and caveats to like, this is how I feel because this, but I don't mean this. It so like you have all of these different little mini thoughts, but it's like you're restricting yourself to 4 panels. How do you make the distinction on which core thought and which main message is the thing that's going to carry the entirety of the story, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I don't know if there's any like specific thing that I'm looking for with any certain thing. Either I think it tends to lean towards what do I find funny or what do I find interesting. Mm-hmm. What thing am I getting like an actual like mental image for? Then I'm like, okay, I'll use that and I'll work off of that. Okay, so now I've got point 2 that I've got to make, or panel 2. I drew this in panel 1. How do I lead to panel 2? And so it's a little different every time, but I think generally it's what do I find the most interesting? What is my brain actually able to build an idea off of?
Whatever thought that you're working on, I assume it's like the summary, like whatever thought is it kind of becomes the thesis of the project or the piece.
Yeah.
Does it typically resolve like at the very last slide? Like, is that where the main message is really felt, is at the last panel? I guess, where do you wrap the bow? Like, do you start with it and then build from that? Or is it like you know the ending and what you want to say and you're trying to build around it?
I think it depends. Because there are some cases where the image that I'm getting from reading through my ramblings, where the image is like the 4th panel, it's the final image. How do I lead up to that? Or the idea is the first panel and it's the introduction of the idea, and then the remaining panels are sort of an exploration. It's like first panel is thesis, second, third, and fourth are sort of like the deconstruction of the thesis. Yeah. So it kind of depends. Yeah.
Are you the type to? I'm the type of person that likes things to resolve. I don't know if it's the musician in me and wanting to resolve to like the home root note or something, root chord. Yeah. Do you like open-ended, or do you like it to like come home at the end?
I think usually I like it to come home, put a bow on the idea, because because a lot of times like the lunch breaks are sort of like versions of my mental health journalings.
They're like snapshots.
Just like very filtered down for the public eye. Yeah. I guess probably another like realization right now is like putting the bow on it kind of gives like a finality to that idea. Yeah. It's like, all right, I've closed the chapter on ruminating on that thought.
Yeah.
Now I can move on from it.
Right.
So I think I do prefer the bow, but I think there are some ideas that are a little more abstracted that are like more of just a thought or like something I've been pondering, and I'm like,
yeah,
kind of just throwing the question out there, like,
right?
And then the lunch break entry is, I've got this idea that I'm struggling with.
Right.
Let's
you don't have
an
answer for it, but you're exploring it. Yeah.
I'm thinking about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Totally. I completely agree with that, and I relate to that a lot, because that's how I think. Even when I do the resolution or wrap it in a bow, it's not that I've figured it out. And I rarely try to say like, oh, I figured it out, because I feel like that's just, my mind changes all the time. For us to resolve whatever the mini story of the day is, I think it's like the recognition that we've kind of broken through our thought a little bit. In any story, there's like a little bit of conflict, right? So there's just like, I've been thinking about this idea and I don't know how to resolve it in my head. You do the exploration, and then at the end, there's some type of resolution. And that resolution is either, I've realized that I don't really know all the answers and it's not really about that type of thing. It's like,
yeah.
But there's still an acceptance to it, I guess.
Yeah, I think. I think it is a part of sort of like what a lot of people say about like journaling for mental health is like one of the practices that I've heard, and like I do it sometimes depending on how well I'm doing, is if you basically like write about the idea, whatever thing you're anxious about, just write about it, let your brain wander and ramble about it, and then close your book, put it away. The idea is it's out there, it's out of your system, and if it stays out of your system, good, that's helpful. If your brain keeps coming back to that and you feel like you need to write about it again, then maybe there's whatever thing that is deserves further exploration.
Yeah, I think you're inspiring me to add that to my practice, not feeling like it's limited to just like a mental health notebook. I know you said that you probably should have them compartmentalized. Yeah. But a lot of the mental health kind of like, or even anxieties when it comes to creativity, it's all centered around our creativity. So, and a lot of times we're expressing that anxiety or whatever into our creative work. So a lot of times I feel like before I even put it in my notes or my notebook, I feel like it has to be some type of like half thought out idea, rather than just kind of dumping what I'm feeling and maybe coming back to it later or something.
Yeah. I think I'd probably relate to that as far as like, I guess an example would be like, a lot of times I see other artists post their sketchbooks and each page is like this beautiful finalized masterpiece. And I often will see in the comments other artists being like, man, I wish my sketchbook looked like that. And I'll talk to other artists about their sketchbooks and like, my sketchbook looks like shit. Like it's bad. It's hot garbage. I'm like, good. It's the exploration thing. It's not supposed to be as pretty as people put in the sketchbooks. Like it's the exploration of thoughts and ideas and figuring out, if you're drawing whatever shapes, or if you're writing about mental health, like what's the thing that your brain keeps coming back to that you're struggling with. I take back compartmentalizing and having different journals. I think it's a good idea to have it all just a journal to dump in, basically. Yeah.
You mentioned you work off of Photoshop. Are you a Photoshop like Procreate or?
Procreate now. Photoshop. Okay. I don't want to be a hater, but Adobe is.
Oh yeah, the subscription.
Adobe. There's always problems. I use it at my job, and every day there's another update that causes something else to crash. And luckily, my job pays for it.
Yeah.
With work, but like outside of work, at home, I don't want to pay for that. So Procreate, $10. It's got all the functionality I need. If I need anything specific, I mean, there's tons of accounts on YouTube and TikTok that have the coolest little tips for stuff. I'll find a fix on there pretty easy.
I use like the same brush for everything. Like it's just one look. Now, is your Procreate layer management, does it look like your notebook?
It depends where my mind is at. Sometimes I need organization.
Okay.
In order to get through something, and then sometimes I need to just like be a little like just chaotic with the organization and just let whatever happen. I probably lean more towards much more organized and Procreate. Because if I'm drawing something and I'm doing like full color drawing and I have effects layers on stuff for shadows or whatever, it helps to know which grouped folders I have, foreground, middle ground, background in separate groups of line work, and then color is in foreground, middle ground, background. And it helps so I know, crap, this line looks bad, I can go back. I know where to find the layer to make that correction.
Oh, so you're helping your future self.
Yeah.
Because I imagine that when you weren't doing that, it's just like such a mess that nothing's labeled, and it's just like, what is that?
Yeah, or you make a mistake and you've gotten 80 something % done with the drawing, and you go back to find the layer that it's on, and you realize you merged a bunch of layers, and now you're like, it's like playing a video game, and you get like 4 hours into the game, and you find out the past 3 hours are corrupted, but you needed to load back like 20 minutes to redo something. You're like, crap, well, now I gotta start back at hour 1 of the game and play through all this again. It's better to keep it organized.
Yeah, that's a good call. Do you ever do kind of like non-destructive techniques in that, like, you get to a certain point with your project, and say you have a bunch of groups like merge or something like that, and like you're starting to get into the detail work. Do you like duplicate so you have a backup?
Yeah, I'll do a duplicate file, and then sometimes I'll like group everything, all of my layers saved, and then I'll duplicate that entire group.
Okay.
And then I'll start merging separate groups in there. That way it like minimizes the amount of layers, and I'm like, all right, everything I've done up to this point is good. And so now I'll start building on top of that with like fewer layers to organize and sift through.
Gotcha. But you always have like
a
little bit of a backup there.
Yeah, it's like safe scumming drawing.
Yeah. And do you ever get rid of it?
There are times where I'm just like feeling a little risky. I'm like, I'll just merge everything and draw on top of it.
We're doing it live.
Yeah. So sometimes it just makes it a little more fun. That's where my adrenaline rush comes from.
Yeah. I was curious. I'm looking at a lot of your art on like your webpage and Instagram. You do a lot of colors, but there's one color in particular that I noticed that you go to a lot, and it's this blue color.
Yeah.
I want to know about that, because it's like that's a very intentional choice to like land on this color.
I don't know if it's like a signature thing or
your quote unquote brand. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, it's not even for like branding's sake. I think it's becoming like a lifelong version of like my like lunch break process of like take the big thing, hone it down, and get down to like make things more, I guess, utilitarian. Where it's like the base shapes, base colors, fewer things to work with, less things to think about. And I don't know, blue's always been my favorite color, that particular shade of blue. It's made it easier than the pressures of like incorporating color theory and making sure colors look good for the design of the thing. Like, I like blue, and I drew it, and it just looks better to me this way.
Yeah.
Than if I was to try and spend 5-6 hours coloring the thing and recoloring it because I hate colors, and my brain. I've taken color theory courses. I've got color theory books. I use color theory websites on that like have different color themes just to like have ideas.
Yeah.
And I spend too much time thinking about it and like ruining, in my opinion, a drawing because I spent all this time worrying about color, or I picked the wrong colors, and like, this is my favorite blue, it looks good, I make it blue. It's
actually very profound. Like, it's funny because it's like so why did you pick blue? And the answer is because I like blue. But like, it's actually very profound, and not to sound like I'm always connecting things that maybe not be connected, but what I've been hearing so far is that like your experience with creativity and art comes from a mental health space and escape, and your mind is open to so many different ideas to the point where it might be overwhelming. And art and creativity is your vehicle to find a way to make sense of it all.
Yeah.
Somewhat. And your practice in like finding the big picture, breaking it down into smaller pictures, it makes sense that you're just, for the pureness of it, is selecting just a single color. I don't know. To me, that's really beautiful, and that's actually very intentional, kind of an art practice to do that. I wrote that down in my questions, just like color blue. It's like, why that color? And I got a even better, like you gave me a better answer than I expected, because it's like, wow, it's like he's actually really trying to get the purest version of the story, not just in the one frame cartoon, but like in the way you just selected a color. Did it take you a while to pick that shade of blue?
I've always leaned more towards like the royal cobalt blue in terms of it being my favorite color. I took an online course with this cartoonist that I really like. He does like a risograph mini comics online course. You basically write a 12-page comic and you set it up for risograph printing. It was a particular shade of blue that was on this chart of risograph, like ink colors that were on there, and I really liked it. And it's like, yeah, like the color of my soul. Like it's like when you find a color, or you find like a movie that just feels like you, or a song that feels like, when I'm walking down the street and I feel like my most self, this is the song that's playing. Like it's like the ambiance to my existence. Like this blue is like the ambiance to.
I didn't realize you were a poet too. The color of my soul, bro. That's amazing. No, I love that. So how does that work? Because I'm seeing that I don't know how long you've been doing this, but you're starting to do kind of large volume pieces on the wall and stuff. Are you specific with that color blue, like marker or whatever material you use?
So far I have been. It's been more of a like, how do I take? Because I've been in another bout of not really working on art as much the last like year and a half, 2 years. Yeah. And I've gotten sort of burnt out on digital art and just like hunched over an iPad trying to draw on a little screen. Like I spend 8-9 hours a day behind a screen at work anyways. The last thing I do when I come home is be hunched over another screen. Yeah. This was sort of how do I take drawing on like 11 inches and do something more tangible, something I can actually move around and feel, and actually make space of this little guest room I've got in my house. And like, let's do something that feels real and not me like curled up on the couch. Yeah. Drawing physical, watching TV. Yeah.
So like with you trying to encapsulate a feeling, how would you describe like aesthetically how you like represent that in your work? Like I feel like the anatomy of your characters play a factor in me knowing it's your work. You know, so at some point you had to make a decision where you're like, oh, I'm going to make the legs long and the torso shorter. How did you arrive there?
Arriving there actually was from like actually character design courses in college. Okay. They tell you to play with basically like big, medium, small in proportions, whether that's like big torso, small head, medium legs, medium head, big legs, small torso. Yeah. Kind of matching that. And I tend to like the combination of like, I guess, medium head, medium torso, big leg. Yeah. Like that proportion. For some reason, when I draw, I tend to lean towards that. And the shapes that I use, I guess, work better in that proportion, at least like in my opinion when I draw. And I guess same as picking, a single, like blue, just doing single color. Everything sort of boils down to reducing the amount of steps, the amount of things I have to think about, repeating the same shapes over same proportions and stuff. It makes things easier because if I sit and think about the relationships of proportions too long, the roundness of a character's head, the squareness of a character's head, if I spend too long, if you think of like working on something as a to-do list, it just makes that to-do list longer and I will never get the thing done. And so I think everything sort of boils down to reducing the amount of steps, reducing the amount of decisions and options that I have so that I can just get the thing done. Because otherwise I will not finish a thing and then I'll like beat myself up about it because I'm an artist and we're supposed to be finishing work.
Right.
I like how it looks. It's probably not the most technically correct thing all the time. Like I should probably play more with proportions more, make things more interesting. Like this, these proportions look interesting to me and it helps me get my work done.
Yeah.
And apparently it's distinguishable.
It is. It is. Is there something that you feel like it expresses, like that proportion? Or is it more of just like the gut, I like aesthetically how this looks? Does it go deeper than that? Or it's cool if it's just like, this looks dope?
I think it might just be that it looks dope to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Sometimes it's just like that.
Yeah, it looks good to me, and when things are looking good to me as I'm drawing them, it makes me want to keep working on it.
Yeah.
And sometimes I guess that's probably the easy route instead of struggling with the thing and like really working through it to get the art as good as it can possibly be.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. When your gut,
I just want to do it.
Sometimes when you can't explain it, but you just know like that's the right choice. Just like it's blue. It's blue. It's always been blue. It's always been you. Yeah. You just know. And I love that when sometimes there's room to not have to explain, right? I think a lot of times, especially in social media, everybody, I don't know, I feel like I always have to explain the process, or we have to, especially in this, right? Like I'm interviewing you about your process. So of course I'm asking you to explain, but I also appreciate when people can't explain and they're just like, yeah, I don't know why, I just do. And, or like, you can't explain your style. It's just how it comes out, and I'm happy with it. So
yeah, some things are just you.
All right, let's wrap it up with one more question, and I ask this to every guest. What's something that you're just working on to get better at?
I think it's probably like my universal always struggle is sticking to a routine. I've started another project with a friend of mine. It's sort of because I haven't worked on lunch break in a while. But my friend's a writer, and we're working on basically a sort of continuation of the idea of lunch break, essentially called Butts and Flats. And it's basically, it's like lunch break in that there's a character dealing with mental health issues, and then they've got their like sort of side companion. This is two roommates, and they both happen to have their mental health issues as sort of unwanted roommates. Yeah. And it's sort of about the friendship of these friends as the only people that can see each other's mental health roommates. Yeah. And helping each other through whatever daily issues. But what I'm noticing with this project is my lack of time management skills. And sticking to like, all right, I've got this many to work on. She's written like 3 seasons worth of this thing. Just tons of ideas, and I've got a whole outline of all these things to work on. I have dates that I need to work on them, and I'm hitting certain parts of it on the right time. Other things I'm like, I need to be working more on, like character design or something, or I have to finish comics 1 through 3 on these days. And so it's finding ways to work on like a full-scale project in the middle of my life, and finding once again, sort of utilitarian stuff, like what are the base levels of process that can make functioning and getting the thing done easier.
Yeah.
I have a really hard time sticking to tasks. It's finding a way to, I guess, sort of work around that and find how to be accepting of some days I don't have it in me to work on the thing. But how can I work on the thing tomorrow but not burn myself out? And so it's like balancing multiple scales all the time, and which scales need to be balanced depends on the day. And
I feel that so much, man. Some days you're feeling really motivated. A lot of times I have a hard time sometimes reaching out to people to schedule these craft talk interviews. I have this thought in my head where like at a certain time I'm like really inspired and really refreshed, and I'm like, I'm gonna reach out to all these people and we're gonna schedule this, and then that way I'm gonna have like a backlog of interviews and it'll be perfect. But then there's the little voice in my head, because I know there's always those things where it's just like, what if on the day that you schedule it, you're just not up for it? And that's tough, you know? And
yeah, it's too real.
So you end up not making any plans at all.
Yeah, because you're thinking you're getting too far ahead of yourself, because you're like, well, like I might be sick that day. Probably not going to be sick, but like mentally I'm just going to be tired, and the last thing I'm going to want to do is interact with another person.
I don't want to be like fake. I don't want to be inauthentic in that, like, I was so excited for this conversation, but that certain day, like, I'm a little bit off or whatever. The work is getting to a place where it doesn't, you think about it for 2 seconds, you realize it's irrational, and then you move on. So it's like, that's the work, which is way easier to say than actually do. Dude, this went by so fast. I mean,
it was quick.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation. I really appreciate the work that you do, and even just sharing the things that I can just relate to so often. So if you're ever feeling like you're not a real artist or whatever, I got you. I see what you're doing. Yeah. For someone who also took a pretty decent break from it all. I took a break from creating, but I was also just keeping up. Like, I mean, get on social media to just like lurk around or whatever. But like, I was keeping tabs on you, man. Like whenever you'd put something up, I'd see it. And sometimes it's hard to know if people are actually watching, because you don't see the feedback all the time.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you're scrolling and you see it, and in my head I'm like, oh yeah, Joe's doing his thing. But if I didn't say it enough, it's just like I see the work that you're doing, and you're tackling really deep thoughts, and there's a lot of weight to that.
I appreciate it. Yeah, that's nice to hear, because there are times where I'm like, does anybody care? This is like so self-indulgent and so specific to me.
Yeah.
Like what's the point? Like it's good for me to work on the thing, but who cares if I post it? But there are times where I'm like, Tito's told me before that he relates to this. So
you're pouring your soul in a lot of these, like especially the ones with having the dialogues of just like, for you to be able to put it on this thing in a seemingly just like nonchalant Instagram post or whatever, right? That took so much like thought. So the thing that gets published has so much more backstory behind it.
Oh yeah.
That I think people understand, but they maybe not be able to intellectualize all the time. So they're like, a little heart or whatever is nice, but not many times do they have an opportunity to get on a podcast interview, and for me to finally like look at you in the face for the first time and just be like, yo, you're doing the thing, man. Like, you got it, you're doing it. And like, I can see where you struggle, but there's a comfort in this camaraderie that you and I have, and a lot of people that I've spoken to, all of us are relating about the same thing. It's crazy.
Yeah. That's why I like the podcast, man. It's very validating, because folks that you interview like are also just working full-time jobs, like doing things. And it's like, okay, so I'm not the only person who's like, it's been a nightmare time trying to fit in and have the energy to work on the things that actually like make my soul happy. Like,
Joe, thank you so much for jumping on, and we'll do it again.
Thanks for
sometime.
having me, dude.
Yeah. Cool. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Craft Talk. Joe and Tito signing out. We'll catch you next time. Bye. Boom. Nice, dude.
Cool.
What'd you think? Was that...